Buenos días. Goedemorgen. Can I please ask everybody to take their seats? We still have people coming in, so they need to really identify where they have some room to sit. As you know, today we're heading to the second day of the Policy Dialogue Forum, and I have the pleasure to start with a session that will focus on strengthening policies for the professionalization of the teacher workforce. So before we begin, again, I would like to ask you to please take your seats, to turn off your mobile phones, and a few announcements. You have in front of you, you have headsets. Make sure they work. Make sure you use them. This morning session will be in Spanish, in Arabic, and in English. Of course, we have translation to the 4 languages. So we'll begin in just 1 minute. We're having the last people coming into the room. Whom I'll ask to take their seats swiftly. Very good. So let us begin. Good morning again to everybody. As we said, we have a session today that focuses on the strengthening policies for the professionalization of the teacher workforce. As you remember, yesterday we spoke about the shortages, and we talk about the policy levers to address the teacher shortages to make the profession more attractive. And one of those ways of making the profession attractive has to do with the sense of a profession. So when we say the professionalization of the teaching force, we refer both to the qualification, to the training, but also the sense of belonging to a professional body with a sense of a career, mobility, teacher education, so that they have the ease to flourish. So those are the issues that we're going to talk about today, and we have a brilliant panel for it. But before we do, I would like you to join me in welcoming Mr. Buti Manamela, the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training of the Republic of South Africa, for some opening remarks. Please, Mr. Manamela.
Thank you very much, Carlos, Program Director. Good morning to everyone. But in particular, if I can recognize our Director General for the Department of Basic Education, and also Ms. Nancy Lorena Murocho Kimbilko. She was explaining to me that she has a double-barrel surname. And Murocho is her father's surname, and Kimbilko is her mother's surname. So that's how she got the double-barrel surname. She's the Deputy Minister of Education in Ecuador. And also let me extend my greetings to Honorable Mr. John Ntim Fojo, Deputy Minister of General Education from Ghana, Professor Mohamed Belhoshine, African Union Commissioner, and also Mrs. Stephanie Gianni, Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO, Dr. Heinek Kuhn, who's the co-chair of the International Teacher Task Force for Education, government departments, including my ministry, or our ministry, and most importantly, yourselves, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On this, the second day of the 14th Policy Dialogue Forum in South Africa, addressing the imperative of strengthening teacher education policies to ensure that we have quality teachers, shows the importance of teachers in the quest towards achieving sustainable development goal number 4, which is of ensuring an inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. Teacher professionalization is a necessary imperative in education reform policies, given the understanding that governments have regarding the benefits of a literate and well-educated citizenry. In South Africa, the journey of professionalization unfolds across various stages, starting from initial teacher education, traversing through registration with institutions such as the South African Council of Educators, induction into teacher profession, and onward to continuous professional development. This trajectory underscores the principle of collaborative engagement and emphasizes the interdependence and shared responsibility across government bodies, educational institutions, and educators themselves. Such collaboration is indispensable to the crafting of holistic and effective policies that nurture the growth and efficacy of teachers, and thereby enhancing educational outcomes and contributing to broader societal progress. The transition from an apartheid state to a democracy underpinned by human rights and social justice has included reforms across all sectors of our lives. And in the realm of policy discourse, there was well-intentioned advice against dwelling too deeply on our past, fearing it may impede our progress. This cautionary stance reminds me of the fate of Lot's wife in the Bible, who was turned into a pillar of salt for turning back to look at her doomed town as she journeyed forward. Much like her, we were warned against being entrapped in historical inertia, unable to forge forward. I respectively challenge this so-called conventional wisdom. Instead, I choose to draw inspiration from the wisdom of President Nelson Mandela, who regarded our past as a repository of valuable lessons, guiding our trajectory into the future without constraining it. Mandela advocated for a discerning retrospection, urging us to glean insights from the past while discarding its pitfalls. It is through this discerning lens that I embark on the initial segment of my discourse, recognizing and addressing the skepticism often encountered in the formulation of educational reforms policies in our country. A distinguishing feature of education reform post-apartheid is the plethora of policies that were developed to ensure a quality education system for all. The temporal space afforded by the demise of apartheid and deracialized education provided opportunities to disrupt the inequities of the past and intentionally and purposefully design an education system symbolic of a rights-based democratic South Africa. However, the criticism of many of the education reforms leading up to the beginning of the 21st century was the perceived obsession with political symbolism inherent in the discourse of policies of the time. These constrained the implementation of the policies and the realization of equal education for all. Essentially, there were examples of glossy rhetoric that would inevitably lead to policy gaps. Professor Kada Asmal was Minister of Education from 1999 to 2004 in our country. I should emphasize that at the time when he was minister, I was president of some student organization in that period, and we used to lock horns quite a lot. And now that I'm here, I understand some of the challenges that he was faced with. And myself have to lock horns with those who came after me. But he acknowledged the scope, the challenge of confronting him were. And scholars elsewhere state that he acknowledged the formidable task that lay ahead of him in education reform. And one of the things he said was, and I quote, "I was told by everyone I met that we as South Africa have created a set of policies and laws in education and training that are at least equal to the best in the world. Yet our public believes that we have a crisis in our hands. The people are entitled to a better education service, and they must have it. The policy gaps still exist in South Africa today, as evidenced in public sentiment and extensive research done on education policy in South Africa post-1994. A survey of our education policies formulated to improve our education system shows that we still have challenges in implementation as we try to ensure our commitment to quality education as declared in international and regional declarations such as the UNESCO Sustainable Developmental Goal 4, the Ichion Declaration 2015 towards inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa that resonates with African Union 2063 agenda. Our National Development Plan similarly states a commitment to our children and young people in South Africa. A somewhat non-existing conflict between what is aspirational and what should be translated into policy, and trying to make best of whatever available resources to ensure that you realize the aspiration. And I think that that unseen contestation between aspirations, policy, and resources that are available is part of what we saw and we actually still experience as part of the transitional phase in our country. However, with the benefit of hindsight, we've learned that the commitment to quality education cannot be seen in isolation. It is surrounded by a complex space embedded within a network of competing priorities in a country that is still grappling with poverty, high levels of unemployment, and complex social issues. Most of these very structural challenges that remain persistent and not only affects education and various sections in our society. Yet we must acknowledge that in principle, there is deep commitment to change, and despite our challenges post-apartheid, we're still pursuing our vision of a quality education system for all in South Africa. We regard the impediments to policy implementation as stepping stones towards our vision. Because we believe we need to state what our vision is. We need to state what our aspirations are so that we're all clear as to what goal we're working towards. But sometimes stating those quite clearly and in some instances in policies means failed commitments if we do not have the resources to back that up, also in the immediate. Because I think being in government makes you realize that service delivery takes not the patience of government, but the patience of society. Because if it's not happening to me, it means it is not happening at all. We don't realize that priorities have to go to 62 million people, but we assess the impact of those priorities on an individual basis or on a sectoral basis. And I think those are some of the challenges that were expressed by Kada Asmal at the time, and challenges that still remain persistent, and I suppose challenges that exist anywhere else in the world. The professionalization of teachers in terms of initial teacher education policies and qualification is the mandate of the Department of Higher Education and Training. In reflecting on our teacher education policies for professionalization, I've come to recognize that the initial agency for reform, which characterized post-apartheid, was necessary to our development because in the process of moving fast, we learned new lessons at an equally fast pace. I think some of you are aware that we, for instance, hastened in closing down colleges of education in our country so that teacher training should be based in universities. And we're beginning to reflect on that, and we're beginning to reopen some of those teacher education colleges because their association with the apartheid system does not necessarily mean that it was a wrong intervention. And so we grow as we move forward. Furthermore, in instances where policy has not kept abreast with emerging national and global imperatives, we've demonstrated our competence and capacity for innovation by developing strategic and responsive plans to meet our needs. This adaptive approach underscores our commitment to continuously improving the quality of teacher education, even in the absence of updated policy guidelines. And let me explain some of these points through a further discussion. The National Policy Framework for Teacher Education and Development in our country succinctly encapsulated its purpose in the caption, "More teachers, better teachers." It centered on addressing issues of supply and demand while simultaneously enhancing the quality of teachers within the system. The framework recognized that teachers were inadequately prepared to meet the educational needs of a fast-growing democracy in the rapidly evolving global space of the 21st century. And this was not the mistake of teachers. This was the mistake of government and its intervention and focus on resources. And sometimes we tend to look at the person who's at the center of the classroom, forgetting that we all have a collective responsibility to make sure that we prepare those teachers for that task. To address these challenges, targeted interventions were implemented, resulting in significant increase in the number of graduates from 6,000 in the year 2000 to just under 30,000 by 2023. I think those of you who have attended graduation ceremonies in some of our universities know that the biggest component of graduates are teachers. The pursuit of better teachers reached a pinnacle in 2009 with the convening of National Teacher Education Summit, which was aimed to identify and address the prevailing challenges in teacher education development that hindered efforts to enhance the quality of teachers and the quality of teaching. Subsequently, the Integrated Strategic Planning Framework for Teacher Education and Development was formulated as an outcome of this summit. And under this framework, higher education institutions were tasked with the responsibility of establishing an expanded and accessible formal teacher education system. This endeavor has successfully realized through the establishment of 2 new universities, and thereby ensuring that 24 out of 26 public universities now offer initial teacher education and continuous professional development programs. Through these concerted efforts, teacher professionalization was significantly strengthened, ushering in an era where teaching became recognized as a graduate-level profession. Unsurprisingly, the summit also highlighted the need for attention to quality, to teacher quality in terms of professionalization. Research on curriculum content in teacher education programs revealed discrepancies across universities, impacting teacher knowledge in their specialization and ultimately compromising professionalization and quality. Consequently, the Integrated Strategic Planning Framework for Teacher Education and Development recommends the development of specific teacher knowledge and practice standards to guide curriculum content in teacher education program. This move towards standardization aimed to ensure consistency across universities regarding specialization content, superseding the autonomy previously granted to institutions in curriculum development. The policy on minimum requirement for teacher education qualification was enacted in 2011 and revised in 2015 to align with the new higher education qualification sub-framework of 2013. This revised policy replaced its 2011 predecessor, which had itself replaced the norms and standard for educators in 2000. The revised minimum requirement for teacher education qualification embraced the recommendation from the Integrated Strategic Planning Framework for Teacher Education and Development to involve subject experts in developing knowledge and practice standards for specialization, improved the teaching practice component, and clarified the language specialization at different level. In cases where policies were not scheduled for review, our department secured funding to strengthen the professionalization of teachers and, for example, there was a national need for qualified teachers in the foundation phase, which is grade R to grade 3, with a specific focus on teachers who would use African languages as the language of learning and teaching. This was supported by the Department of Basic Education through the Funza Lushaka Bursary Scheme. Additionally, the department supported universities in developing knowledge and practice standards for maths and literacy. Presently, the minimum requirements for teacher education qualifications that I spoke about earlier is undergoing a review. And the revised version will address new areas for professionalization, including education for sustainable development, digitalization, and the evaluation of and the elevation of African languages. Department of Basic Education has embarked on a targeted campaign to strengthen mother tongue-based bilingual education, and universities has to obviously be responsive to this. The HSRC, entitled Building Teacher Professionalization for Quality Education, recognize that the policy landscape for teacher development in South Africa is a supportive one. It would be remiss for me not to share our concern about the absence of policy on artificial intelligence in teaching and education in view of the rapid global developments in artificial intelligence. Many youngsters who have studied hard to hone their skills are increasingly worried about ChatGPT, for instance, which they've discovered can generate eloquent answers, which are not only erroneously and misleading, but also fails to incorporate diverse voices. And I want to believe that artificial intelligence risks making a case for rapid improvement in teacher quality. As I conclude, the journey ahead is both challenging and promising. By investing in our teachers, we invest in the future of our country, ensuring that our nation not only grow in knowledge and skills, but also in compassion, in dignity, and in quality. And it is befitting to borrow the time of the program director and to leave you with the wise words of Nelson Mandela, who, as you deliberate further over the next few days, to take into consideration, and I quote, "It is not beyond our power to create a world in which all children have access to good education. Those who do not believe this have small imagination." Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. In the interest of time, what I would like to do is to call our panelists that you can see here are on the screen to take the stage while we play a video recapping the interest of global teacher shortages and the addressing the making the profession more attractive. So maybe if we can play the video, and I can ask my panelists to come to the stage, please.
Being a teacher provides a unique opportunity to transform lives. Teachers shape the futures of learners and their communities, and in doing so, unlock pathways to great personal fulfillment.
J'exerce ce métier avec foi et vocation.
বাচ্চারা যেন পড়ালেখা শিখতে পারে ভবিষ্যতে যেন উজ্জ্বল করতে পারে কেননা বাচ্চারাই হচ্ছে আমাদের ভবিষ্যৎ
However, the teaching profession has been affected by a decline in appeal, status, and working conditions. We are facing a global teacher shortage. The world will need 44 million additional teachers to achieve universal primary and secondary education by 2030. And yet, between 2015 and 2022, the rate of primary education teachers leaving the profession nearly doubled, jumping from 4.6 to 9% in only 7 years. The first edition of the UNESCO and Teacher Task Force Global Report on Teachers examines this complex challenge and offers key insights to address it. One of the key aspects in responding to this challenge is the proper financing of the profession. The annual cost of new teaching posts required to achieve universal primary and secondary education by 2030 is estimated at $120 billion per year. This would mean ensuring consistent public funding at 6% of GDP for all countries. In a world where the global average in expenditure was 4.2% of GDP in 2021, and only 3.1% in low-income countries, the challenge to cover the funding for all new teaching posts seems insurmountable. But there is good news too. Some countries in sub-Saharan Africa have already increased their investment in primary education, while others around the world have made efforts to improve salaries and build pathways for career advancement, starting with programs for novice teachers, which have successfully increased teacher retention and helped build a sense of belonging among educators. The report shows that enhancing the professionalization of the teacher workforce and granting teachers enough autonomy and decision-making authority at the classroom, school, and policy levels can lead to more successful education policies and programs, as well as higher motivation among teachers. Given the size of the teacher shortage and its global scope, the solutions must also come from the international community as a whole. Following the discussions and commitments made by member states at the Transforming Education Summit and the recommendations of the United Nations Secretary-General's high-level panel on the teaching profession, the report is a call to action to dignify, diversify, and valorize the teaching profession. Supporting teachers is a key investment in our collective future. Together, let's enhance the appeal of the teaching profession. The time for action is now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as we said, we're very happy and honored to have a very prominent panel to speak about the theme of this session, which we said is strengthening policies for the professionalization of the teaching workforce. So as we have heard, we've heard the inspiring opening remarks of Deputy Minister Manamela, speaking of education as a means for social transformation, and speaking of addressing and redressing past injustices by means of education. Also, the provision of education, reactivating teacher colleges, spoke about collaboration, and that is one of the key areas that we will speak about as we address the transformation of teacher education and professional development. We have with us a set of practitioners, experts, academicians, former ministers of education, leaders of research centers that work on teacher education and professional development. As we move on to the panel, just to bear in mind one of the key messages of the global report, which draws inspiration from the Transforming Education Summit and from the Futures of Education report of UNESCO. In order to transform the profession as a collaborative one, we need to transform teacher education and professional development. So the implications for that has to do with how we organize training. It has to do with how, in a collaborative fashion, we transform initial teacher education, how we prioritize moments of engagement, moments of encounter, communities of practice and exchange. That together, as we said at the beginning, with the sense of belonging to a career that has mobility pathways and that can result intellectually attractive, not only in terms of income, but also in terms of the commitment of teachers to fully develop their potential. So for that, we have a panel, as you can see, composed of, and I would like to welcome Ms. Lilia Concha. She's the director of the CPIP, del Centro de Perfeccionamiento, Experimentación e Investigación Pedagógica del Ministerio de Educación en Santiago de Chile. Bienvenida, Lilia. If we can give her a hand. Then we have Mr. Quentin Wooden. He's my colleague, director of the International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa. Welcome. We also have Ms. Rifat Arif, better known as Sister Sef, and I would say better yet known as the winner of the Global Teacher Prize in 2023. Welcome. We have with us also Professor Nadine Peterson. She's a Dean of UJ School Education in South Africa. Welcome, Nadine. I'm happy to welcome as well Ms. Fatima Royce. She's the Deputy Director General for the Regional Center for Quality and Excellence in Education in Saudi Arabia. Welcome. Last but not least, we have Mr. Ricardo Cuenca. He's a lead researcher at the Instituto de Estudios Peruanos and former Minister of Education of Peru. Welcome, Ricardo. So maybe we can begin with the first question, and I will switch to Spanish if you want to use your headsets. La primera pregunta es para Lilia, que trabaja en este centro de perfeccionamiento docente. Sabemos, Lilia, que Chile pronunció una ley de carrera docente en el 2016. La idea era tener una estrategia comprensiva que atrajera a las y los docentes, que les apoyara. Nos gustaría escuchar de ti cuáles han sido los resultados de esta política y cuáles son los cambios que el actual gobierno, que el CPIP propone para las y los docentes en Chile.
Perfecto, gracias, Carlos. Muy buenos días. Partir señalando que me siento emocionada y muy honrada de estar aquí, en la tierra de Mandela, en un momento en que además Sudáfrica una vez más vuelve a ser un referente para la conciencia ética de la humanidad. Y lo quiero decir porque esto se relaciona también con las reflexiones educativas que a mi juicio deben inspirar la política pública, si no sería solo una cuestión técnica y quedaría desprovista de sentido, sería política sin alma. Y por eso, entendiendo que la escuela debiera ser ese preludio o esa antesala del país y de la humanidad en la que queremos vivir, me parecía importante decirlo y partir señalando eso. En Chile tenemos una ley que formaliza una carrera docente que entiende que el desarrollo profesional debe ser una ruta, un camino, una trayectoria acompañada, que comienza con políticas de atracción a las pedagogías desde la enseñanza media, es decir, cuando los jóvenes están por salir de la enseñanza secundaria y definiendo su vocación universitaria, que construye estándares de formación inicial que rigen a todas las universidades y carreras de pedagogía, donde se definen los desempeños de formación, donde hay obligación de que las carreras pedagógicas estén acreditadas según estos estándares, si no, no pueden impartir la carrera de pedagogía. En Chile hay solo 2 carreras que están obligadas a tener acreditación para poder formar profesionales, la carrera de medicina y la de pedagogía. Luego, esa formación inicial definida por estos estándares de formación es evaluada en una prueba diagnóstica un año antes de que los estudiantes de pedagogía egresen, justamente para que las universidades apliquen remediales en aquellas áreas en las que todavía su desempeño no es el esperado. Se titulan y hay una política de mentoría definida también por ley. Se reconoce el derecho de un profesor Nobel recién titulado a tener un profesor mentor con años de experiencia y de buen desempeño que le acompañe en un proceso de inducción en sus primeros 2 años de ejercicio profesional. Luego, una oferta de formación continua que debe responder a los resultados de evaluación docente. Los docentes en Chile están obligados a evaluarse cada 4 años con 2 instrumentos: un portafolio que reúne evidencias sobre su práctica en aula y la rendición de una prueba de conocimientos didácticos y también disciplinares de la asignatura que imparten. En virtud de esos resultados son ubicados en un tramo que junto a la cantidad de años de ejercicio profesional define su salario, pero además también la oferta formativa que deben recibir. A pesar de todo esto, y aquí viene las dificultades que hemos tenido en la implementación de nuestro sistema. Tal vez se aprende más de los errores o puedo compartir mejor el aprendizaje de los errores que de los aciertos. A pesar de todo esto, de que Esto ha permitido un aumento en un promedio de un 30% del salario de los docentes en Chile. Dentro de América Latina, Chile está dentro de los países que mejor remunera a sus profesores. Sin embargo, a pesar de esto, tenemos un serio problema de deserción del ejercicio docente, sobre todo los profesores nobles sus primeros 2 años de ejercicio. O sea, hay allí un grupo en el que tenemos que concentrar nuestras políticas de apoyo y de acompañamiento. Probablemente porque las políticas de mentoría no han logrado la cobertura que la política pública necesita para poder retener con mayor fuerza a los profesores jóvenes en el sistema educativo. Pero sobre todo porque observamos que repensar el rol y el desarrollo profesional docente continuo exige repensar la escuela, exige repensar cuál es la escuela que necesitamos para la sociedad en la que queremos vivir. Hoy día en Chile, y creo que eso es probablemente común a una problemática del mundo, la escuela ya no se observa como un espacio protegido, más bien se observa como un espacio hostil, como un espacio donde la segmentación social, nuestras problemáticas sociales ingresan al aula y profesores y profesoras deben enfrentarlo en solitario. El error que hemos cometido es que nuestros sistemas de evaluación docente apostaron mucho a la rendición de cuentas, a la competitividad por sobre la colaboración, a la idea de que la estandarización, la elaboración de ranking y la exigencia en el accountability era lo que iba a empujar la mejora. Hoy día, a 6 años de implementación de la ley, teniendo recientemente una evaluación internacional del PNUD, se confirma la hipótesis que hemos tenido en la experiencia. Y es que si no promovemos una cultura de colaboración, de conformación de comunidades de aprendizaje entre docentes, donde se le valore no solo como un reproductor de técnicas didácticas y de conocimiento disciplinar, sino que como un productor de conocimiento, como un profesional que crea saber docente, que crea conocimiento sobre la didáctica y la pedagogía, y no se le valora de ese modo, entonces no importa cuánto pueda subir el salario, no se pone en valor la profesionalización. A nuestro juicio, la etapa que viene es promover una evaluación que ponga la dimensión formativa, es decir, un evaluar para aprender y mejorar, por sobre una evaluación que solo viene a sancionar o a cobrar resultados, responsabilidades a los docentes. Yo diría, y esto ha aparecido bastante durante el seminario, y lo reforzaría en la idea de producir colaboración, de crear redes docentes, de fortalecer y aumentar la cobertura de las políticas de mentoría, es decir, superar esta idea de que el ejercicio profesional docente es un ejercicio individual y solitario. Esto debe ser en colaboración, debe ser en colectivo y con una visión de la escuela como un espacio que construye comunidad, que construye vínculo y que por lo tanto es el lugar donde tenemos que contagiar humanidad. Y contagiar humanidad implica un Estado que construye una relación con sus docentes de respeto, de valoración y de cuidado. Los docentes educan y cuidan a nuestros niños, a nuestra infancia y a nuestra juventud, y para eso necesitan ser apoyados y también cuidados por el Estado que se hace responsable de generar las mejores condiciones para su ejercicio profesional. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Lilia. Muy buenas tus intervenciones, Lilia, muchísimas gracias. Solamente para hacer quizá un guiño a uno de los elementos que mencionaba y que ojalá podemos retomar hacia el final del panel. La importancia no solamente de la colaboración, pero también de los programas de inducción, de los programas de bienvenida a los y los docentes nobles, las personas que se inician en la profesión, como una de las mejores estrategias para la retención docente, para la motivación, y el reporte también demuestra en algunas experiencias también una inversión mucho más efectiva en términos económicos también, mucho más sostenible en el tiempo. Muchas gracias, Lilia. Vamos a pasar ahora a Mr. Quentin Wadden, Director of ICBA. And we know, Quentin, that a few weeks ago, ICBA, in UNESCO's International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa, launched the first Africa Teachers Report on the role of teachers and school leaders in educating girls by different strategies. So what does the report say? And what does this series, how can this series support the issues we're talking about today in terms of teacher development, professionalization? Please, Quentin.
Thank you, Carlos. So to answer this question, I would like to make 4 points. The first one is not controversial at all. The 3 others, a little bit on purpose. All right, so the first point is that, as you mentioned, we launched a report a few weeks ago at the European Union on the role of teachers and school leaders for girls' education. And that's part of a slight change in how we are working at ICBA, the International Institute of Capacity Building in Africa. We are a capacity building organization, so we do lots of trainings, but we decided that we also needed to do research to inform policy dialogue, and then the policy dialogue then informs capacity building. That's the point that is not controversial. I think everybody would agree. There is nothing really new. It's a bit new for us in terms of how we work. So let me go to the second point, which is a little bit more controversial. So what the report says is that perhaps a lot of what the literature says on what can be done to improve girls' education may not focus on what would be the most cost-effective way to improve girls' education. And the report actually follows on some work I did when I was at the World Bank. And at that time, on policy recommendations based on a literature review on randomized controlled trials and other quasi-experimental research, what I used to say is that since the gap between boys and girls becomes larger at the upper secondary level, let's look, and that's what the literature does, at what works at the upper secondary level to keep girls in school, and that is typically incentives to keep girls in schools. What the report says is that, well, actually, the main reason why both boys and girls drop out of school is lack of learning, using new data to show that. If that's the case, then the most important thing that you can do for girls' education is actually to improve foundational learning. And there are a number of things that you can do, including having more female teachers, having more female school leaders. And that's a completely different take. It basically says it's less about social norms than it is about foundational learning. And what was interesting at the meeting in Brussels is that we had a panel with 5 commenters, and all 5 commenters insisted on social norms as opposed to lack of learning. But that's good because at least it gives a debate and it gives a discussion, and then we can try progressively to look at what's the best cost-effective way to improve girls' education. And of course, we need both, right? We need foundational learning and we need something at the upper secondary level. So that's what the report says, but it has very practical implications for what ICBA is doing. We just got a new grant from Japan to improve girls' education in West Africa. And so we need to have a good balance between foundational learning and social norms and incentives at the upper secondary level. So it has very practical implications. That was my second point. And that second point is to say, we may think at some point that we have the right answer. And I thought incentive for girls to remain at the upper secondary level was the right answer a few years ago. No, I'm not so sure anymore, right? The third point is also perhaps a little bit controversial. And that touches both on the report we released at the EU and on the Global Teachers Report, right? I think we need to have both aspirational and practical analysis, right? And I see to a large extent the report we released at the EU as aspirational, and I see to a large extent the report that we just released here, the Global Report on Teachers, as aspirational, right? But we also have to be very practical. right? And when we quote, for example, the numbers of 15 million teachers that we need, you all understand, I think, that's the number of teachers we need if everybody in Africa had full secondary education in 6 years, while the current rate of secondary enrollment is about 45%. So many countries will not get there. So we also have to be practical. And when we get to the practical, then one key question is, for different African countries, is the main challenge the shortage of teachers, or something else that is also mentioned in the report, the shortage of qualified teachers, right? And to me, the value of the report is less the big numbers than actually the detailed analysis of various issues, right? And I have a hunch, but I have not done the work to show it. It's actually more important in the next 6 years in Africa to better train the stock of existing teachers than to increase largely the number of teachers, right? That's a hunch. And we would need analysis. And I'm saying it a little bit in a controversial way because we need to have those discussions, right? How much do we put in terms of the very limited financial resources available to hiring more teachers versus training the stock of existing teachers when we know that we have 9 in 10 children who are in learning poverty in Africa? That's a debate, right? And I think we have to really think in the practical as well as the aspirational. That was my third point. Now, my last point is just to make 2 very simple suggestions. 2 things that don't cost much money, but I think that can have a very positive impact on education systems in Africa. So the first suggestion is that we need to encourage ministries of education to do online surveys of teachers and school leaders, typically every year or every 2 years, to do 2 things. To see what's the level of satisfaction, and we will know that most teachers are not satisfied. We know that, but that's okay. You see the level and you see whether this improves over time with the different policies, and then to drill down in specific issues that ministries may be concerned about 1 year or another year and so on. It costs almost nothing because it can be done online, and I think it can reveal a lot of useful information. It's not easy to do, by the way, because there's a lack of trust between teachers and teacher unions and governments in many countries. But doing that, I think, can provide a lot of valuable insights on what could work to improve teaching and learning in Africa at very low cost. That's one recommendation. The second one, and that's a transition in a way to the next person who will talk. I mean, I'm a numbers person, by the way. I'm an economist, right, with all the bad things associated with economists. But numbers help to convince for a policy, but I think numbers don't motivate us, right? And I've been much more inspired in my life by stories, right? I think we need to have many more stories of teachers. One of the small things we did at IGBA a few months ago is to interview the winners of the Africa Teachers Award. And it's a mind gold about, stories, right? And I think that we need to find ways to build those stories, and we have a wonderful story coming up. So Carlos told me, stop. I'm stopping, but I hope that this was a bit of food for reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Quentin. So from the numbers to the stories, from the policy to practice, I'm very happy to welcome Sister Seth, the winner of the Barkis Global Teacher Prize last year. And what we wanted to hear from your work, Sister Seth, in the SUE Foundation. What are some of the challenges that you see in teachers' access to training, and which strategies can actually be introduced to ensure that teaching remains an attractive profession, a collaborative profession, and one that builds community? Please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And if we talk about the encouraging the teachers and the rewards, I would like to give my example. I have been working in rural Pakistan. I have schools in the villages of rural Punjab, Pakistan, where we give 10 years of free education to underprivileged children. And when at the age of, oh my God, so esteemed people are sitting in front of me that my heart is beating so fast. Drink some water, and then I will be unstoppable.
Very good.
Anyways, So I was 13 years old when I started teaching underprivileged children. I kept the foundation of the school in the courtyard of my home. And I started working as a child laborer to fund the school. And I have been doing it for 26 years. And I have never thought that someday I would be sitting here in front of such esteemed people. And I never thought that I will become a voice for the teachers and for the children who have never been heard. And I never thought that I will be sharing my personal experiences as a community leader, as a teacher, and the good practices that we have been doing in our school. So the credit goes to UNESCO and the Worky Foundation and Dubai Care for having me the opportunity, for having me this recognition that I'm sitting here today in front of you. So thank you very much. The recognition is very important for the teachers. And if you talk about Pakistan, Pakistani government is serious about education, and they are doing many things. Like in Pakistan, the minimum education is now bachelor's in education or master's in education. And another very important thing that our government has done is the distant learning in education. Like if young people are working, even then they can pursue their education through Allama Iqbal Open University in education, and they can become professional teachers. But like other developing countries, we have also many problems like lack of resources, lack of funds. So I think in this case, it's not only a responsibility of the governments, but also the people like you and like myself. In my school, if we talk about the teachers in rural areas, what we do in my school, I have 30 team members now. I started alone, but now these are all my former students. They completed their 10 years of free education. And then I started giving them scholarships. Some of them are completing their masters in criminology, in women and gender studies, in finances. They're doing their MS, and they are also working with me. I pay them salaries, and I also give them scholarships to have higher education. This is how at ZWE Foundation, Zephaniah Women's Education and Empowerment Foundation, we are uplifting young girls, and we are giving education to the children. On a very practical note, sometimes in the morning I was telling somebody that, in Pakistan, over 80% people have deficiency of vitamin D. And when we have this deficiency, we cannot focus on our work. Sometimes teachers feel lazy and dizzy, and So what I do, I arrange to give them vitamin D on monthly basis. I arrange for them milk and fresh juices so they can have a better health. And when I see that a teacher is, she's looking sad today, I immediately recognize it and I ask her, is everything okay? How may I help you? So this is the responsibility of community leaders, and it is also important for the policymakers, for the national and international leaders to find out the people within the community who are serious about the future of the children, who are serious that education is the backbone for our better future. And one more thing, that especially in developing countries, in rural areas, we have youth and we have children. Children need education, youth need jobs. And there are lack of opportunities, lack of resources, lack of jobs. I was thinking that, like I did in my school, why don't we motivate these young people to join the teaching profession? I'm not saying that we should, tell them to do it. We have to motivate them. Like when children complete their 10 years education and they are trying to pursue a career, maybe we can, in the career counseling sessions, we can tell them that because, the young people are very enthusiastic. They want to make a difference. They want to change the world. And the teaching is the best profession to make a change. If you want peace in the world, you become a teacher. If you want to contribute towards reversing the climate change, become a teacher. If you want to work on the, interfaith and intrafaith harmony, or you want to do something in science, become a teacher. So as a rural leader, I think we should focus on the youth who are looking forward towards an opportunity to have a career and who have a fire inside to make a difference. Because as all of you know, that if we have good teachers, we have a promising future. So maybe we can do these practices. I have been doing it. My school is a living example for this. We have also another thing that we have implemented is that in 2014, I won a Lynn Sims Global Prize, and I was given 20,000 USD. So what I did, I made a vocational center, and I started giving free of charge vocational training to women. 6,000 women have completed their education. The children, the girls who complete their 10 years of education, they learn skills, and then they become able to pay for their higher education, their college and university fee. And the young women, when they complete their vocational training, they are able to give good food and good environment to their children. So we have to think about the things, how we can produce healthy children, healthy teachers, healthy environment, and then they will take in the education that we want to give them for a brighter future for our world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Seth. So we see a combination of policies to incentivize youth to enter the profession, together with door-to-door rural initiatives of motivating community actors to actually join the profession and the promises that it holds. Thank you very much for your testimony, Sister Seth. Now, let me move to academia. Let me move to Nadine Peterson. She's an executive dean at the Faculty of Education at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. Something that we've been speaking about, Nadine, is precisely the transformation of teacher education. And I believe that is something that you are working on. We talk about the beginning, the changes that it has in terms of the implications of making the profession more collaborative, the kind of pedagogies that you use, service learning, action research, engaging with the community, and the such. How do you embed those programs into what you call practice-based research and research-based practice, as well as community engagement within and across borders and cultures by teaching? Please, Nadine.
Thank you so much for that. I think speaking, and it's very hard to follow on such a story because academics tend to be a bit boring. But I think if we don't see teacher education as separating practice-based research and research-based practice, for us they go hand in hand. It's about seeing what lessons we can learn from practice, and we have many examples. I'm going to share a few today, but also looking at how we can learn from theory and implement in practice. For us, it's about being both consumers and producers of knowledge in teacher education, both for us as teacher educators, but it's also the kinds of orientations we want to instill in our students themselves. It is about developing deliberate practice. It's about developing pedagogical reasoning in our students. It is also about developing teachers who can make educational decisions based on research, based on theory, but who are also comfortable themselves with doing research in the form of practitioner research, action research, and so forth. So one of the first innovations, and some of these innovations are specific to UJ, but some are also national innovations. Many of them, like the first one, is the development of a teaching school. Our regulatory framework in the country provides for the establishment of teaching schools and professional practice schools. And UJ was fortunate, together with the Department of Basic Education, the Department of Higher Education and Training, and the Gauteng Education Department, to develop a school on its campus. It's 13 years old, so it's a bit of a sulky teenager at the moment with some problems, but it gave us the opportunity to engage student teachers in learning that would weave seamlessly between the coursework that they do and their practice experiences in schools. So student teachers from their very first year, for instance, could be paired with a grade R child or a grade 1 child, and they would learn about children's development in tandem with seeing children on a regular basis develop, learn, change over time, understanding how what they were learning theoretically about teacher education was either manifesting itself within the practice environment or not, and what the reasons for that were, whether it was to do with language, mathematics teaching, or any other subject. An offshoot of that is, and so all that research is also in the public domain. An offshoot of that, about 4 years ago, was the development of a school-based student-teacher program. And this program, in a sense, tried to mimic what we were doing with our teaching school. So we partner with very well-functioning public and private schools where students do their teaching education online, so their coursework, but they have a mentor, a very capable mentor assigned to them in a school. And the idea is that the capable mentor will enter a kind of cognitive apprenticeship with the student in order to be able to explain or unpack the thinking behind actions in a classroom. And that work is supported by the Zenex Foundation, and it's also part of a national project called TICSA, and I see Dr. Kiwi there in the corner from the Joint Education Services who run that. We also focus very strongly on the development of core teaching practices. Now, let's take questioning, for example. Everybody thinks, oh, well, asking a question is asking a question. Any teacher can ask a question and get the kind of response they require. But actually, it's a development, it's a real skill to ask the right kind of question under the right circumstances. Questioning for deep thinking, for what do we do about wait time? I don't know if you've ever been in a classroom, but a student asks a question, and before pupils even have 2 seconds later, they're already demanding an answer. So it's about those kind of strategies. We've been experimenting for the last two years with FNIRS, and I always trip over this word, functional near-infrared spectroscopy. So the headsets are put on students and learners, and it goes hand in hand with questioning to see which parts of the brain light up when students are talking and asking questions. Of course, in the broader South African context, we have other innovations, such as the Teacher Choices in Action module, which was developed under the leadership of Professor Lee Rosniak, and it was during COVID at a time when students couldn't go into schools. And so this enables students to get examples of good teaching. It allows for them to look at recorded lessons for analysis, so they can really think deeply about the choices teachers make. And I think I see Lee over there. So thank you, Lee. Another aspect is also developing action learning in students in their 4th year, and I'm almost done. So community engagement, which is the last area, is about, we believe very strongly in service learning, so it's not, community service is in no way removed from the academic curriculum of students. Thank you, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Nadine. We hope to come back to those topics of the practicum, of the pedagogical knowledge that teachers can actually produce in school-based practices. But now our next speaker will speak in Arabic. So if you want to put your headsets on, we have the pleasure of having Ms. Fatima Royce. She's the Deputy Director General of the Regional Center for Quality and Excellence in Education in Saudi Arabia. And the question, Dr. Fatima, is we know the center, the RCQE, conducted a study on the accreditation of teacher preparation programs in the Arab countries, and that it pointed out to different witnesses, not the expected results that the teacher education and teaching practice is actually having in a number of countries. So what are some of the promising practices and forms of regional cooperation that is also fostered by RCQE to improve teacher education and continuous professional development in the region? Please.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية أتوجه بالشكر لجنوب أفريقيا والفريق الدولي المعني بالمعلمين على هذا الحدث العالمي الهام اللي نتناول فيه السياسات والمنظور الحالي والمنظور المستقبلي من أجل تطوير كل ما يخص جوانب المعلم. هذا المعلم اللي نعتبره هو مهندس التغيير في النظام التعليمي. طبعا مركز اليونسكو الإقليمي للجودة والتميز في التعليم هو معني بكافة أنواع التعليم، سواء التعليم العام أو التعليم الجامعي أو التعليم التقني والمهني أو أي نوع من أنواع التعليم. أجرى العديد من الدراسات منذ عام 2016 وحتى الآن موجهة بشكل كبير للمعلم، وأهمها كانت المراجعة التطويرية لبرامج إعداد المعلمين للمرحلة الابتدائية والمتوسطة والثانوية، وكانت على مرحلتين. أيضا تطوير برامج إعداد المعلم بالشراكة مع كليات التربية، كذلك أيضا السياسات والبرامج التدريب أثناء الخدمة، وأيضا برامج التنمية المهنية، كذلك أيضا وضع دليل إقليمي للمعايير التخصصية والكفايات وما يخص الرخص المهنية، ثم أيضا وضع نظم لإعداد المعلم وتأهيله في العالم العربي، وما أشار له السيد كارلوس بما يخص الاعتماد الأكاديمي لبرامج إعداد المعلمين. وسلط الضوء في هذه الدراسة على التجارب والممارسات الفضلى الموجودة في الدول العربية، وأيضا الممارسات الفضلى في الدول العالمية، ووضع إطار مقترح من أجل تجسير الفجوة ما بين الممارسات اللي موجودة في الدول العربية وأيضا التوجهات العالمية. كذلك رصد جزء من ممارسات. نعرف أن عندنا في الدول العربية دول تمر بأزمات، يمكن أشارت لها السيدة رفعت، فكانت لدينا دراسة مخصصة للتجارب الناجحة بما يخص عملية التدريس أو التأهيل أو التنمية المهنية. سلطت الضوء هذه الدراسة على كيف نعزز جاذبية مهنة التعليم، أيضا كيف نطبق الأطر المرجعية لعمل المعلمين، وأيضا الحد من قبول المعلمين غير المؤهلين، وأيضا استثمار أن تكون المدخلات لكليات التربية أو الجامعات المعنية بتأهيل المعلمين يعني مدخلات نوعية، وأيضا إقامة شراكات سواء مجتمعية إقليمية عالمية من أجل تجويد صناعة هذا المعلم. وضعت هي منظومة من خلال إطار عمل سلط الضوء على السياق الاجتماعي، السياق الثقافي، السياق الاقتصادي، السياق السياسي، من خلال اقتراح مجموعة من البرامج سواء فيما يخص إعداد البكالوريوس أو الماجستير أو حتى الدبلومات المهنية أو عملية بناء القدرات لبرامج فعلا توعي بهذا المعلم، وأيضا الاستثمار الأمثل للمعلمين القادمين. كذلك أيضا سلط جانب من الضوء على عملية إعداد هذا المعلم ما قبل الخدمة وأيضا أثناء الخدمة. كذلك أيضا سلط الضوء على السياق العالمي والتوجهات الحديثة. نعرف أن قضايا التعليم متعددة، وخاصة ما يخص قضايا قمة التحويل كان جزء منها الاهتمام فعلا والعناية بالمعلمين وما يخص توظيف التكنولوجيا أو حتى عملية التمويل. أيضا اقترح في هذا المشروع إقليمية الإطار بحيث أنه يعطي للدول خصوصيتها في عملية كيف تستفيد بما يتناسب مع واقعها وأيضا الممكنات والقدرات التي لديها. أيضا تشارك عملية تدويل إعداد المعلم، وهو شبيه معمول فيه في الاتحاد الأوروبي أو الدول المتقدمة، كذلك التنوع في البرامج المقدمة، وأيضا إعداد الطلاب المعلمين لوظيفة بديلة داخل برامج إعداد المعلمين. طبعا الإطار ثري، فيه آليات، في جوانب هامة، كذلك عملية مرحلة الاعتماد الأكاديمي، وهي شبيهة بسلسلة العمليات التي تتم بدءا من التشخيص وحتى عملية الاعتماد، ومن ثم عملية متابعة ما بعد الاعتماد ووضع خطط تطويرية مستدامة. شكرا سيد كارلوس، وأعتذر للإطالة.
Thank you very much, Dr. Royce, for the work that you're doing at the RCQE. You mentioned a very important dimension in the transformation of teacher education, which is embedding lifelong learning as practice. Thank you very much. Last but not least, I'm gonna switch to Spanish now. We have Mr. Ricardo Cuenca. Él es investigador principal del Instituto de Estudios Peruanos. Fue también ministro de Educación en Perú, así que tenemos perspectivas académico-políticas. Y uno de los temas importantes para la profesionalización de las y los docentes tiene que ver con la posibilidad de tener una carrera diversificada. En el reporte hemos analizado el rol que puede jugar una carrera docente estructurada en la que las y los docentes pueden diversificar su práctica. Pueden hacer materiales educativos, pueden ser mentores de otros profesores, pueden ser directivos, pueden participar en desarrollo curricular, etcétera. Creemos que las carreras docentes, según su estructura, pueden servir para motivar, para mantener a las y los docentes en la profesión y evitar la deserción docente que hemos visto en estos años. Así que queríamos preguntarte, Ricardo, ¿cuáles son algunos de esos ejemplos? ¿Cuáles son algunos de esos efectos que pueden tener las carreras docentes según sean estructuradas? Sé que tienes experiencia en América Latina y si puedes darnos algunos ejemplos, mejor. Por favor.
Thank you. Gracias. Before I switch to Spanish, I would like to thank UNESCO and TTF for inviting me to share some ideas with you. And of course, I'm pretty happy to be here in South Africa once again. So now, sorry, interpreters, I'm going to go to Spanish. Para que las carreras docentes, en general las carreras públicas, funcionen de mejor manera, sean carreras de docentes, de los médicos, de los jueces, de los policías, de los militares, funcionen bien, requieren tener al menos dos factores que son los que quiero compartir con ustedes. El primero es el enfoque general que las define y que las orienta. Esto quiere decir que la literatura nos ha mostrado que hay posibilidades distintas para plantear una carrera docente. Podemos hacerla de una forma tradicional, basada en las funciones, con un enfoque muy normativo, que es lo que tradicionalmente ha existido en buena parte del mundo y particularmente en América Latina. Pero también podemos hacer una carrera definida sobre la base de los puestos, es decir, basada en el desempeño, basada en la definición de qué es lo que necesito que el docente haga en las aulas. Ese enfoque no es tan normativo, es un enfoque más meritocrático y esa es una de las primeras decisiones que los estados deben tomar porque ambas tienen consecuencias positivas y negativas como casi todo en la vida. El segundo, y adicionalmente, definir esto nos ayuda a esto que Carlos mencionaba, a estructurar mejor las carreras. hacer carreras, por ejemplo, de promoción horizontal y no promoción vertical, en donde los docentes pueden mejorar sus condiciones de trabajo sin tener que salir del aula. Tiene que ver con hacerla más larga y más ancha, es decir, puedo trabajar en el aula, pero también puedo trabajar en la gestión, puedo trabajar en la investigación, puedo trabajar en dos de ellas. Esto casi siempre es piramidal y esto es importante para el financiamiento porque la mayor cantidad de profesores están en la base de la pirámide y muy pocos en la cima de esa pirámide. Y por lo tanto hay un presupuesto que también hay que pensar a la hora de plantear la carrera. El segundo factor está basado en la idea que las carreras son políticas públicas. Y en las políticas públicas, me pongo un minuto el sombrero de exministro, las políticas públicas siempre son una decisión política detrás. Siempre. Cuando decidimos qué es lo que queremos hacer, estamos tomando una decisión política. Y a partir de ahí diseñamos la política pública. Ojalá diseñada de la mejor manera posible. Es decir, cuidando cómo se agendan los temas, cuidando cómo se diseñan, cuidando cómo se implementan, cuidando cómo se evalúan, sobre la base de dos elementos. Uno primero, que las carreras docentes pensadas como políticas públicas deben estar vinculadas a otras políticas docentes. No es posible diseñar una política de carrera docente si no pensamos en la formación de los docentes, en la evaluación de los docentes, en los esquemas de bienestar, porque de lo contrario no solo estará desarticulado, sino que finalmente no se logrará lo que queremos en el fondo, que es con lo que voy a terminar. Pero además, esta política pública tiene que ser desarrollada con dos componentes que son difíciles de lograr, pero que tienen que ir de la mano. Legitimidad social y buena capacidad técnica para hacer la política. Una política bien hecha y una política que está apoyada en la gente, que la gente cree, y en particular los docentes creen en esa política, esto va a funcionar mejor. Termino con unos ejemplos de América Latina de lo que podemos aprender algo y que puedan ser útiles en general. Durante mucho tiempo, América Latina mantuvo unas carreras muy tradicionales de los docentes, con estabilidad laboral, con promociones verticales, todo aquello que ha ido poco a poco cambiando. Hasta el año 2015, México, Ecuador y Perú tenían carreras totalmente con enfoque meritocrático. Otro grupo como Chile, Colombia, República Dominicana tenían algunos elementos, yo llamé en algún momento carreras en transición, y luego el gran grupo de países en América Latina con una carrera muy tradicional. Esto fue cambiando porque cada vez hay más procesos de transición de carreras, pero también fue cambiando porque nos dimos cuenta que sin legitimidad y capacidad técnica las cosas pueden cambiar. México dejó de tener una carrera con enfoque meritocrático y le tuvo, a partir del 2016, como comentaba Lilia, una carrera totalmente clara. Por eso quiero terminar con las dos ideas fuerzas que espero sean de utilidad. Lo primero es que pensar y diseñar una carrera supone un trabajo en el que sabemos que hay que tener mucho esfuerzo de participación, mucho manejo de conflictos y mucha búsqueda de acuerdos, porque no es fácil montar mejores carreras. Y en segundo lugar, tener una narrativa que nos permita decir a los docentes que valen la pena, que les exigimos más, pero que les ofrecemos también mejores condiciones de trabajo. Porque finalmente una carrera docente no es solo un nuevo contrato entre el Estado y los docentes. Una nueva y buena carrera docente debería ser un instrumento importantísimo para el desarrollo de la profesión. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ricardo. So we've heard today a number of approaches to the transformation of the teaching profession, particularly by means of teacher education and professional development. We've spoken about careers. We've spoken about transforming teaching education and elevating the levels of qualification to higher education, at least, which we know is not the case in all countries. We've talked about the development of pedagogical judgment by practice, the special support, the role of the community, and lifelong learning as means of transformation. We can open the floor for about 10 minutes, and I'm looking at our interpreters if they would kindly give us a couple of more minutes. Thank you very much indeed. And I know we're going to eat into the coffee break, but I would like to open the floor for questions or comments so we can have another 10 minutes of panel to discuss with all of you. So I would ask you if you would like to raise your hand, if you want to take the floor, if you want to ask our panelists a question, or if you want to make a comment, but just asking you to keep it under 1 minute. Yes, please. Gentleman in the tie, yes. You need to press the button of the microphone. If not, we can have a hand microphone there, please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you want to just say your name and where you come from, please.
I'm Ellen Princess from the University of Zululand.
Sorry, we cannot hear you. Or can
Ellen
people hear?
From the University of Zululand. Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. This goes to all guests this morning. Perhaps I have something which is directed to Ricardo over there regarding, I fully understand that the whole process of looking at professionalization of the teacher workforce might be in line with the mechanistic approach to how they need to perform out there in schools. At some stage, Henry Fayol once failed in terms of providing or ensuring this mechanistic approach to the workplace. So my point is, I'm trying to think how we can then integrate professionalization of the teacher workforce with maybe morale. And if you can, maybe share your experience, because in the South African context, teachers are complaining about overcrowding in classrooms. Teachers are complaining about the lack of resources out there in schools. Teachers are complaining about poor remuneration packages. This will be covered by the Department of Basic Education, of course. I don't know how we can actually say, yes, we're in the right place. Teachers are in the right place. Teachers are in classrooms. They are there for effective teaching and learning.
It was a 1 minute question or intervention, please.
All right. And we have actually created the ideal schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We keep the question. We'll open the floor a little later after we take a couple of more questions. So well noted on the issue of for Ricardo and for others, the issue of morale and motivation in face of adverse conditions. Yes, please, madam.
Thank you. I'm Hema Hariram from NAPTOSA, a teachers union in South Africa. My question is probably both Lily and maybe Ricardo may respond. Ricardo, you said teaching policy is public policy, and you spoke of transformation in the Latin American countries. Would you be able to share how this transformation took place and the role of labor within the countries, and particularly in both your countries, in this transformation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. So we note it down as well. We have a few more. We'll only be able to take 3 more. So by order of raising hands, we have the lady in the back, the gentleman here in white and black, and the lady with glasses here. Please.
Good morning, everyone here. I am Amal Laba from the Libyan delegation. I'm also the focal point for TTK from Libya. My comment or question is for Sister Zhao, the winner prize. I would like to know, I know your story before. I saw the video before at UNESCO. How you started from few meters teaching few kids at your area, at your small village, was very inspiring. If you just mention the beginning of your journey to the audience, you will inspire many teachers here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We keep that question and we move to the gentleman here.
Thank you. And actually, I also wanted to ask Sister Zeph a question. And yes, oh, sorry, my name is Boaz Waruku from ANSEFA, the Africa Network Campaign on Education for All. I'm based in Kenya. The question I wanted to ask concerns that very humble beginning of Sister Zeph as a community teacher, bringing together a number of other people so that they start that school and it grows. I wanted just to know at what point in time does the government come in to support such initiatives? Because you see what individuals and communities and private actors can do is only limited, but the government collect taxes so that they scale this up. To what extent can that be done? Thank you. I just wanted to know if you've tried that. Thank you.
Thank you, Boaz. And we'll take the final question here in my front, please.
Hello, hi. My name is Anan. I'm from the Ministry of Education, Malaysia. My question is also to Mr. Ricardo. In addition to the question that was given just now regarding policy, I would just wanted to know, because you mentioned the shift in the CPD, can you elaborate on that as well, that you had done, that you mentioned before? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. So now back to the panel. I'm sorry we cannot take more questions. We have run out of time. And therefore, I'm begging the panel to make your interventions in under 1 minute. So we're going to see your synthesis abilities going to be put to the test. So if I may recap, we've talked about the questions have raised the issue around motivation and morale in face of adverse circumstances for teaching. There's talk about the issue of public policy, the issue of the institutionalization and institutional support for practices that might be, funded, sustained, like the one that Sister Zeph was presenting. There was another question around the continuous and professional development and how this is embedded into public policy with those political elements that were mentioned. I'm going to use the same order, going from Lilia to Ricardo, for your 1 minute intervention on whatever of the issues you would like to choose. Please, Lilia.
Perfecto. Gracias, Carlos. Sí, bueno, esta pregunta es interesante porque lo primero que debo compartir de la experiencia chilena, que es imposible llegar a una carrera docente que haga sentido si no es conversada, dialogada y consensuada con los gremios y los docentes. Eso fue muy clave a la hora de poder sacar la ley para que sea además un sistema legitimado, se vea legítimo desde el profesorado y desde las comunidades educativas en general. Allí se definió una carrera que fuera meritocrática y que combinara desempeño con el reconocimiento de años de experiencia. Y se identificaron por ley derechos que están garantizados desde este sistema de carrera. Primero, en virtud de su evaluación docente y de sus bienios o años de desempeño, el profesor se ubica en un tramo que a medida que va progresando en el tiempo va mejorando salario. Por lo tanto, hay un reconocimiento salarial en virtud de su desempeño. Segundo, condiciones para el ejercicio profesional. La garantía de que en su contrato existe una proporción de tiempo no lectivo, es decir, un 40% de su jornada laboral es sin trabajo en aula, sino que con tiempo no lectivo para la planificación de la enseñanza, el trabajo técnico colaborativo con su equipo docente y su formación profesional continua.
Hay un pro-
Vamos a parar ahí.
perfecto.
Muchas gracias, Lilia. Para comentar solamente que también este caso de el tiempo dedicado a otras tareas y el caso chileno ha sido recogido en el reporte también. Muchas gracias, Lilia. Quentin, please.
So maybe one of the first questions, which was about the morale of the teachers and the conditions in which they have to work. One of the benefits of one of the suggestions I made, which is to do surveys of teachers and school leaders, is that you get data on what affects job satisfaction. And colleagues from VVOB, I don't know if they're here today, have launched a very interesting initiative for Africa on school leadership. If I have to say in my 30 seconds left, what can make a difference, most countries today do not have in Africa the ability of raising substantially teacher salaries. Just won't work. The levels of debt are too high. And we need to find alternatives to increase morale. The quality of the school leadership is probably one of the most important factors, apart from salaries, in improving morale. And there are very interesting initiatives about how to improve the quality of school leaderships in Africa. If we can go deep in that, I think that that's one of the most important things we can do in the next few years to improve teaching, reduce learning poverty. So I would say school leadership, school leadership, school leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Quentin. Sister Seth.
If you could please repeat the question.
Well, there were various, but maybe we can pick up the last one we heard from Boaz right there about how these initiatives that are personal, that are community, can actually benefit from governmental support so that they are institutionalized, sustainable, scaled up.
I think in my case, the government has been supporting me because the government allowed me to get my school registered with the Education Department of Punjab, Pakistan. And also on different levels, they have been giving me recognition for my work and the contribution in education. So yes, without government support, we cannot move forward. But the community leaders like myself, I believe that we human beings are human beings because we learn and we share. So the goal of I believe that I was born to be a teacher, and I will be a teacher as long as I'm alive, even if I don't have support. But if I will have support, I can make a bigger difference.
Thank you very much.
I try to keep it minimum and small.
Thank you very much, Sister Sen. And then to Nadine on whichever point, maybe CPD, but up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I view teaching as a public good. I am tired of the antagonistic relationship between labor, teacher organizations, government. And for me, if you look at some of the best performing systems in the world, they actually have a cooperative relationship where the good of the country and the good of learners comes first. The second point I want to make is about the professionalization of the teaching profession. And I think part of that comes from outside, but it is first from within. And I'm not a big fan of one-shot teaching, professional development. I think long-term professional development where practicing teachers set their goals and they really become both consumers and producers of knowledge is where we need to go. The last point is around funding. And that is a national issue that for a teacher to produce a teacher gets a third of the subsidy that is required to produce a scientist or a doctor. And that makes a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Dr. Fachima, maybe a question around also training and continuous professional development and the transformation of it by means of possibly certification, which is what the study of RCQE did.
بما يخص التطوير المستمر للمعلم أو التنمية المهنية، أهم مرتكز بالنسبة يمكن لمركز اليونسكو لقيمة الجودة والتميز في التعليم هو وضع معايير. طبعا هذه المعايير تكون من خلال ما يخص عملية اللي هي التخصص أو عملية ساعات التدريب، أو أيضا بعض الممارسات اللي تتم، على سبيل المثال عملية انخراطه في التدريس أو عملية المزاملة، أو عن طريق عملية المجتمعات المهنية من خلال شبكة تضم معلمين يعني مشهود لهم بالتميز. أيضا تكون هناك جهود مشتركة ما بين النقابات اللي خاصة أو هيئات احنا نسميها هيئات التقويم اللي معنية بالمعلمين، بحيث أنها تبدأ بعملية وضع هذه المعايير للمعلم بحيث يعمل في ضوءها. طبعا هذه المعايير عند وضعها لابد أنها تنطلق أصلا من تشخيص الواقع، القاعدة الأساسية من خلال الجدارات والكفاءات اللي عند هذا المعلم. بعدها أيضا ترصد أيضا في ضوء الممارسات العالمية الفضلى، لأنه هدف أساسي في عملية تدريب المعلم أو الحصول على الشهادة هو التدويل، يعني يصبح هذا المعلم معلم دولي بغض النظر أنه يعمل داخل دولته أو خارج دولته.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatima. And then the last question, actually a couple of them came to Ricardo. So you'll have
Do
1.5
I have 20 minutes to respond or
No.
something like that? Thank you
Please.
for your questions. I'm going to switch to Spanish. Cuando hablamos de política pública, partimos de algo que parece un acuerdo, pero que no siempre es. Y es que la educación es un bien público. Y esto supone que una persona educada, un niño, una niña, un joven, un adulto educado, es más beneficioso para toda la sociedad que para él mismo. Y esto que parece que olvidamos, tiene que estar presente cuando diseñamos una política, porque finalmente las decisiones que tomamos sobre qué es lo que hay que hacer tienen al final esta idea de que la educación es un bien público. Y por lo tanto, para ello resulta fundamental 3 elementos que creo que en Perú, en Chile, en Ecuador, donde lograron sacar algunas carreras, a diferencia de México, donde tuvo más dificultades, es porque creo que la integración de las políticas, para mi colega de la universidad, tienen que ver con diseñarlas con 3 elementos. Mucha participación, mucho diálogo y mucho acuerdo. No es por eso una casualidad que en Perú y en Chile, donde las carreras avanzaron durante mucho tiempo, los sindicatos, los gremios participaron desde el principio en su diseño. Con más acuerdo, con menos acuerdo, pero participaron. No fueron quienes recibieron una carrera. Y creo que es una buena demostración que pensar una política pública como una idea de bien público, pero además siendo muy participativa, muy dialogada y con acuerdos, porque a veces podemos tomar acuerdos incluso en discrepancias. Luego quedan los 19 minutos para seguir respondiendo. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ricardo. So just to close, and I would like to thank all of our. Very briefly, please.
Yeah.
Is the microphone working though?
Yeah. I want to say that education is not just a profession, it's a sacred mission. Let's put all our efforts to identify such people who believe that if there is no education, there is no hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. And so in closing, I wanted to thank our panel for their presentations, and maybe just to highlight 3 elements that we heard today for our discussions to follow, because it will have to do with some of the panels that we will have after this and in the afternoon, which is the transformation of the teaching profession requires collaboration. We've heard today the issue of prioritizing collaboration over competition, and that has implications at the policy level. How we produce policies in a collaborative manner, who do we consult, who has a voice at the table, and how effective are the policies where they're co-constructed in a participatory manner. The second that was mentioned is that teaching is a public good, which is something that we second, certainly, but that has also implications in terms of the access to teaching, in terms of the working conditions of teachers, so that this can be actually sustainable. And thirdly is the very purpose of education that has been recalled here, and of teacher education itself. And that the fact that the collaboration cannot happen in a vacuum. The communities of practice cannot happen in the courtyard or in the hallways. There has to be a space, there has to be a time, there has to be an intentionality, as has been mentioned in terms of public policy, to make that happen. And making that happen requires political decision and requires financing. Again, there's the infrastructures, there's the spaces, there's the time that teachers need to be freed of classroom time to be able to participate in professional development, to be able to construct communities of practice, to exchange, to share the knowledge that they produce in the classroom. So that is something that I just wanted to share with you, to bear in mind as we move into the sessions, that we will touch on financing, that we'll touch on collaboration, international cooperation, and the rest. Please join me in thanking our speakers once again. And I will end with just one practical announcement. I'm sorry, our coffee break has been a little bit reduced, but I'm hoping you enjoy the session. We have an announcement from our hosts, the government of South Africa, which is, as you know, we will be having tomorrow a couple of outings. There are 2 visits that are scheduled to take place tomorrow. One of them will be to the Apartheid Museum, and the same visit will profit to pass by the area of Soweto, the southwestern township. And I know Minister Moshega was a teacher in Soweto, so we'll be very happy to be visiting the cradle of the freedom fighters of South Africa's anti-apartheid movement. So if you want to join these sessions, these visits, please go to the registration desk. You will have to sign in for this visit so that our host can take care of the logistics, and we thank you for that. Thank you very much. Enjoy your coffee. Bye-bye.